everyone, Ms. Hanks here. So today we are looking at Unit 7, Industrial and Economic Development Patterns and Processes, and we're looking at Topic 7.1, the Industrial Revolution. So our learning objective today is to explain how the Industrial Revolution facilitated the growth and diffusion of industry. And the first thing we want to look at is cottage industry, because this is the thing that exists before we have the Industrial Revolution. And a cottage industry really just means that it's a place where we have home-based manufacturing. We mean cottage in the pretty literal sense, literally like one's cottage, one's home. Some characteristics of cottage-based industry: it's small-scale production, it's done in a home, it is pre-Industrial Revolution, it's also post, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's low-tech, and we still use it today. Some examples of cottage industry: home-baked goods. So if you know someone who makes goods at home and sells them from home, that's a cottage industry. If Miss Hanks hand knits sweaters and sells them on Etsy, that's a home-based business, or a cottage industry. Handmade earrings that someone sells either through a little shop or through Etsy or something like that, that's that's a cottage industry. A wedding gown seamstress, someone that you hire specifically to come in and do this for you or make a wedding dress or alter it, that's cottage industry. And bespoke goods, so goods that are essentially tailor-made for you, that's cottage industry. Some non-examples: large-scale clothing manufacturer, sweatshops, stuff that we can buy at Walmart, Nike, any of those things are not cottage industry. To counter that, we're going to look at industrialization, and this is really what we see rise with the Industrial Revolution. So industrialization is the development of industries for the manufacture of goods. They are literally creating places where they're creating whole factories and everything kind of around them and aligned with them just to make stuff. Manufacture really just means make. Some characteristics of industrialization: it's the result of new technology, it's facilitated by access to natural resources, it's going to cause rural to urban migration, and that is what we call urbanization. It's often environmentally damaging, especially during the Industrial Revolution. It's usually more profitable than agriculture, and it's going to result in a rise in colonialism. Some examples: automobile factories, machine woven cloth, job specialization. Some non-examples: home-based businesses, handmade clothing or costumes, traditional crafts, services. So what is the Industrial Revolution? In and of itself, it's basically late 1700s. It starts in Great Britain, kind of goes from the 1760s to the 1840s, and it is a set of technology changes in Great Britain and the US, and really the rest of Europe eventually, that dramatically increased manufacturing productivity. It also is going to change social, political, and economic norms. So let's look a little bit at it. In the 1600s, the Second Agricultural Revolution is going to lead to a massively growing population. We have a ton more food, we have this surplus, and our population is going to start getting really, really big. Even though we still have fairly high death rates, lots of babies are being born and lots of babies are living. So our population is starting to get really, really big. And this is going to lead to a really high demand for goods like clothing, for energy, that the cottage industry is just no longer meeting. It is not able to keep up with it for people who are just making this stuff at home. Imagine you have like 12 kids. It's going to be really hard to make clothes for all 12 of those kids and yourself and your husband, because we know that's the women. Not to mention everything else you have to do. So like maintaining the house, working on the farm, whatever else you have to do, actually raising those children, all that good stuff. So the demand is outpacing the supply. With the energy thing, we used to use these heavy woods to burn and heat our homes and basically run everything, and that was our energy source. So that's starting to become heavily depleted, especially as our population is growing really big. Wood is okay, but not terribly efficient, and the heavy woods, they're really, it just comes, the biggest thing is that it's becoming very, very depleted, so our resources are highly limited. So we're going to start creating factories, and these are going to be originally hydro-powered, water-powered, through water wheels. So if you ever have that, if you've ever seen that little like brick building next to a river, and there's a water wheel on the side and it just spins round and around, that's what it is. And this is going to replace human and animal power. It's a lot more efficient. You don't have to do anything after you've built it. It just keeps going as long as the river is running, and the river is running most of the time. People are going to start using fossil fuels. So we're moving away from wood, and we're going to start using coal. Coal is a lot more efficient, and really importantly, coal is very abundant in Great Britain at this time. And that's going to be the primary fuel that we use during the Industrial Revolution. Coal mines are going to become super important as a result, and they're actually going to help facilitate the invention of the steam engine by a man by the name of James Watt. And this is going to move us away in the Industrial Revolution from hydropower to steam engine, or with steam engines, to this now coal and just a little bit of water to kind of just power everything, and it's much more efficient. People are going to become significantly more productive. We're going to have steamships and things that are going to become significantly more efficient and productive as a means of travel and shipping. So this is a steam engine. This is Watts's kind of first steam engine. We can see it's pretty big. If you've ever seen like the inside of the old ships, like the Titanic and stuff, they had pretty significant, a whole bunch of these engines going on at once, and that's how they moved everything. So it's going to transform heat energy into mechanical power, and really this is going to mean that we no longer are having to build factories on rivers. We can actually move them somewhere else, and this will literally change the world. It's going to change forever, and we'll never go back to what it was. So some of the results of the Industrial Revolution: we're going to increase production of iron tools. These are going to be much improved over the older tools, over wood, and some of our other stuff, and it's going to lead to further improvement in mechanization of the second agricultural revolution, which will mean that we have even more food and, as a result, even more people. Because of that, with this higher efficiency in farms, even more food, all these tools to kind of replace people, engines, we can start having some rudimentary tractors and things eventually. We're going to need fewer agricultural workers, and interestingly, when you don't have a job, you kind of need one, especially as we have more and more people and you have more and more mouths to feed. So people are going to move to the cities to find jobs in the factories, and this is urbanization. Again, remember, we're moving from rural to urban. We're in the cities, people are going to make higher wages than they did on the farms. Still not terribly high yet, but they're going to start building, and eventually over time we're going to create this middle class. It didn't really exist before, but now it will. And this is going to change social structure forever. Nowadays, we kind of consider in most developed countries, the middle class is the biggest class. It's the most seen one a lot of the times. Social structure is entirely different from now until forever with this change. And this is going to push Great Britain and the United States in particular into demographic transition model stage 2. And really quite a bit of the rest of Europe as well, but slightly later on in many cases. It's also going to drive a new wave of imperialism in Europe because they need new markets. They're making all this stuff, but like if I'm making Sharpies or dry erase markers, we'll say dry erase markers. I love dry erase markers. I have a whole bunch of them, but eventually I just can't buy anymore. Like I have too many and they're just gonna get ruined. So if the dry erase marker company wants to sell more, they need to find a new market. They can't just sell them to me. Yes, mine will eventually run out and I'll eventually need more, but sometimes that takes a while. So they have to find someone else to sell it to. And this is what's happening with imperialism in Europe. They need to find someone else to sell to. So they're going to go out and they're going to conquer new places and they're going to take their stuff new places to sell it. This is also, as they're doing this, this is going to drive the demand for more raw materials. Because they're selling more stuff, they have to have more stuff to make the stuff. And so they need all these new raw materials. Eventually they're going to run out. Remember, Britain is not a very big country. They don't have that many materials. So they're going to go out, take over further lands. Britain expands everywhere. We hopefully know the phrase, or if we don't, here is the phrase. Once upon a time during Industrial Revolution, we referred to, or we used the phrase, the sun never sets on the British Empire, because they owned so much of the world that it was literally always daytime somewhere in the British Empire. And with that, they have this absolute corner market on raw materials. It's also going to drive the taste for exotic goods. People want the new and fancy stuff, whether it's fancy clothing, jewelry, food is a huge one. Remember that in Britain they eat things like blood sausage, and in Scotland haggis, and there's like bland stuff, sheep, mutton, without a lot of spices or things naturally. And I'm teasing a little bit. Britain has some good food, but it also has some bleh food. So things like curry, heck, even black pepper, all of this new stuff that they get as they travel across the world. We love ketchup now. They get these things from their interaction with other places, their colonization of other places, and the trade with other places. And yeah, they'll change. We get some stimulus diffusion, especially if we think about things like ketchup. It goes from being like this fish sauce to being tomato-based sauce today. But that concept diffuses over time and changes into something that fits the local tastes and the ingredients they have at hand. So this is going to, this demand for raw materials, this taste for exotic goods, this is going to further promote colonialism in LDCs, and diffusion of goods and profits for further investments or capital, all are going to come as a result of this whole concept of the Industrial Revolution. So we look here, we're looking at the population of the world, and we go all the way back to 8000 BCE, or BC, before the Common Era. And it basically stays the same right about until we start getting into, it's really like the 1800s, and that's what this curve is. Yes, it gets quite a bit higher, but it's a really small, slow increase over time. So that from about year 0, that 1 AD, it's not really a year 0, we have 300 million people. That's about how many live in the United States today. By 1800, we're going to have almost 100 million, almost a billion people. And that number is just going to grow exponentially over time, so that by 2015, we have 7.4 billion, and today we have almost 8 billion, or about 8 billion. And this has all happened in a very short amount of time, especially compared to the rest of history. Okay, so some new technologies that we get with the Industrial Revolution. First one, iron. Steam engine is going to aid in the development of iron tools. It's going to be a lot easier to work. It's going to be much more manageable, and that's going to drive this massive market or massive supply of iron tools that will meet the demand as more and more people are purchasing them. It's going to drive transportation. So we get new steamships. We build lots and lots of canals, which essentially is just man-made waterways. They're going to build better roads. They're going to develop trains, and we'll have steam engines going across continents. It's going to improve textiles. So we're going to replace the cottage industry, which was really small, it was really slow, and as the population grew, it got really, really overwhelmed. This is actually going to be the first industry to have factories. It's going to drive new chemicals. So we'll have bleach, and we'll have new dyes for textiles. It's going to drive food processing. So we're going to start getting canned foods that are going to last longer, and they will feed the factory workers and all the people who do not live on farms with access to immediate fresh foods, which are highly perishable. And it's going to drive medicine and even some basic hygiene, although it's honestly still pretty gross at the time. But even the most rudimentary medicines are going to mean that we have a lower CDR and a higher NIR. And remember, crude death rate and natural increase rate. And this is going to drive us to that stage 2 of the demographic transition model. Remember here, our birth rate's still super, super high. That's part of that higher NIR. Our death rate is rapidly decreasing. Our population is exploding. Okay, so we talked about railway systems. The development of these railways is going to trace diffusion of the Industrial Revolution across Europe. Basically, as we get more connected and look at our first railways opening and where they're going over time. And it's connecting across Europe. This is going to be a much easier and much more efficient way to travel, to ship goods, to stay connected. And it's going to mean that people who had very little interaction before now can travel to see each other. They can travel to visit new places. They can travel to sell their stuff in new places or buy stuff from new places. And the United British Isles are going to quickly establish this rail network, and mainland Europe is going to be much slower because they're much more disunited. Remember that this is basically one country. This is a whole bunch of different ones. It's broken up by mountains and large areas of land and all kinds of stuff. And it requires international cooperation to build these rails. Okay, so some fuels. The fuels of the Industrial Revolution, and even the fuels today, are fossil fuels. This is energy it's an energy source that is formed from organic tissue buried over millions of years, and it is burned to create energy. So it is still our primary source of energy. It's especially our primary source during the Industrial Revolution and the first time that we really see significant use of fossil fuels. Coal is going to be basically our first one, and it's replacing wood and will be our absolute primary fuel of the Industrial Revolution. Petroleum is going to be popularized with motor vehicles. This is oil. It's what we make gasoline out of. It's what we use motor oil and a whole bunch of other things. If you use Vaseline, it's a byproduct, that petroleum jelly. It's what we make plastics out of, and it does not break down over a long period. It doesn't until an incredibly long period of time, literally like millions of years or longer. And then we have natural gas. So originally this is a byproduct of oil drilling. It was just like, oh, hey, that happened. Today we actually do fracking for natural gas. We intentionally collect natural gas and we use it for electricity and to heat homes. One of the big things to note about fossil fuels is they are non-renewable. It literally takes millions of years to create them, so they are non-sustainable. And we have drastically used up the reserves that we originally had, that we had back in even 1800. Heck, even in 1950, we've drastically burned through those fossil fuels. So not only are they non-renewable, they're also highly pollutive. And if we look here, we're looking at the largest sources of energy in the world. So notice that 5/6 of the world's energy really comes from 3 fossil fuels, and that's natural gas, coal, and petroleum. The other stuff is nuclear, and then some smaller ones, things like solar, geothermal, biomass. All right, so looking at some industrial regions today, and this is some pretty important stuff because remember, we want to think about diffusion. Today, industry is concentrated in Europe, North America, and East Asia. And I want you to kind of look at where all of this is. So what is their industrial output? In Europe, we have some areas that are more industrialized than others. The United Kingdom and the Rhine River Valley were our early industrial regions. If you are familiar with World War II at all, this was an area that kind of got taken away from Germany for quite a while, and that was largely to punish them after World War II to make sure that after World War I, to make sure that they could not rebuild a military, which we know didn't work. But quite a bit in the United Kingdom. There's still quite a bit in all of the purple areas here. So make sure to pause here and check over those places. In the United States, you definitely want to know the U.S. industrial region. So largely up here in these areas, these are where we had large natural coal reserves. We were connected by the Great Lakes, and that was a fairly easy transition out into the Atlantic Ocean. And today, the places that are more important are in California. This stuff that's left over is largely what we see as the Rust Belt. So it was once upon a time industrial, but over time we've left it, and when you leave metal behind, when you leave iron behind, it rusts. But we still see the results of this. We still see the history of manufacture in these places. So like, for example, the football team in Pittsburgh is the steelers, and steelers were people who worked in the steel industry. In Detroit, they made cars, so their team is the Detroit Pistons. Piston is one of the mechanisms in an engine. Okay. So I want you to take a moment and answer this question down here. Which region is currently pulling manufacturing due to lower wages? So where are they removing it or pulling it to? Okay. All right. And here we have East Asia, also China. These are really manufacturing powerhouses. Japan is going to be kind of our first area in the post-World War II era when their military is drastically limited and the United States is occupying Japan. But now China has emerged as the new king of industry in East Asia. Remember all of the things that are labeled as made in China. This is pretty important. This is as China has developed, and even as Japan has developed, and they moved more into a service industry or quaternary or quinary with data and research. Data research and development, data, high skills, all of that good stuff that falls in there. One of the things that's really helped China become this king of manufacture in East Asia is the special economic zones. Essentially, they have these areas where it is more efficient, more cost effective, low cost labor, easy access to transportation, where they're manufacturing. And those are marked largely here. All right. And that is it for today. So if you missed anything, make sure you go back and review the video. Make sure you're reading in your textbook. This is all CED topic 7.1, so it's not quite in line with the other things that I've already posted, but this absolutely hits that Industrial Revolution aspect. So make sure you're feeling really comfortable with this. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.